Yeah, well, the meeting was for my own newspaper, the London Independent, not for The Nation, though I did write a piece for The Nation. It was looking back on it, I suppose it was a prescient meeting, although at the time, of course, it was interesting enough. We knew that the Americans were fingering bin Laden as the man behind attacks on American troops in the Gulf. We knew that bin Laden was being accused of running an international network of World Terror Inc. And when I approached him, I think he thought I was going to ask him about World Terror Inc. But in fact, copy of the newspaper later on, and apparently he thought it was fair. He expected it was all going to be about World Terror Inc.
National News, a Hong Kong-based news magazine, reported this week that suspected terrorist leader Osama bin Laden is dying of kidney failure. The reclusive bin Laden is reportedly hiding in the mountains of Afghanistan and is on a dialysis machine being peddled by two of his followers.
Terrorism? That doesn't make sense. Your father was murdered over a war game?
Download it.
Why can't you stay out of this? Leave me buried.
What is Scenario 12D? We know it's a war game scenario, that it has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is that important enough to kill for?
Because it's no longer a game.
If some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination?
Depends on who your terrorists are.
The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline?
There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction.
For what possible gain?
The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stockpile against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin-pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart-bombed.
I can't believe it. This is about increasing arms sales.
Mm-hmm.
When?
Tonight?
How are you going to stop them? Why didn't you tell the world this? Go to the press.
You think I'd still be drawing breath 30 minutes after I made that call? The press? Who's going to run this story?
We would.
This? This is birdcage liner. Wild-eyed crap right up there with Elvis as an alien and two-headed babies.
You obviously read it.
Don't be so damn naive. You think this is going to save the world? I'm doing what I can, John. I don't have all the specifics on Scenario 12D, but I think I know the flight they've chosen. You stay out of it. I don't want Overlord gunning for you, too.
Atlantic National announces your final boarding call for Flight 65, Washington, D.C. Boston Logan Airport. For this, all passengers will be ready for Atlantic National.
You said they intend to bring us down in the middle of New York City? What if there is no bomb?
Well, how are they going to bring it down?
Same way a dead man can drive a car.
What do you mean, no bomb?
Langley, I need you to hack into the aircraft's onboard navigation system. We need to know where we're headed.
Okay, go into headsets. I'll clone the airphone's carrier. Make them think we're sending a ground-to-air fax.
That's one twisted Star 69.
I'll just get ready to ride the wave, hippie boy.
Just get me on that plane and I'll get you autopilot access.
How are you going to do that?
Airline telemetry systems use processors similar to those found in CB radios.
I'm in. We got ourselves a convoy.
What's your progress?
I've hacked into the flight control system output.
With a little bit of help.
It's what the brains of the plane is telling the little black box.
Course, heading, attitude, hold, yaw, axis, stabilization. What the heck's that?
Is that what it looks like?
I think it is what it looks like.
What does what look like?
Modem protocols. Remote access. Somebody on the ground's flying your plane.
Bogey, sir.
Keep your course. We need to know our flight plan.
I'm mapping the data now.
Spires. Your flight's gonna make an unscheduled stop in exactly 22 minutes.
Corner of Liberty and Washington. Lower Manhattan.
World Trade Center. We're going to crash the plane into the World Trade Center.
The building is going to contain not 2 million feet, but 1.7 million. And that's one of the sacrifices we have to make. I said, let's make it and let's get on with it. And so, next thing you know, we've got the designs of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002.
(9/11) hearings, Condoleezza Rice is asked about this presidential briefing, and she says, we didn't think it had anything to do with anything specific. It seemed to be just some general thing that we already knew, that bin Laden had some plans to attack the United States, and we didn't consider it all that significant. But you point out something in the book I thought was quite interesting, I personally hadn't seen before, which is in something called the SEIB, the Senior Executive Intelligence Brief, which is essentially normally, if I understand correctly, more or less what's in the presidential brief, but it goes to many more people. That whole memo on bin Laden has been taken out. Well, if they consider it so not of any great significance one way or the other, why on earth would they take it out?
One explanation would be that they didn't want there to be a broadcast of the possibility that we might be under specific threat of terrorists using airplanes.
Building is going to collapse. Nothing information.
Area, the second tower is coming down.
They tell you the second tower is
Yes, it's about to collapse.
away from the building. I want you to move all the people away from the building.
However, when the buildings collapsed, we could hear a rumble, which was about 5 seconds long, preceding the actual collapse, and then a boom when each of those towers collapsed. And then one person described it as a strange sucking noise as the buildings did implode after that. Now,
Whenever I tell people about the sounds, sights and sounds that I heard on that day, the thing that got me suspicious was when I saw the replay of everything the next week and the week after, they took the explosions out. That's how I knew something was up. And the detonations that took both buildings down were exactly identical. First, it started off with about, I'm just guessing, 6 or 7 seconds of this very low frequency rumble, and then the detonation started, and they went boom, boom, boom. They were a little less than a second apart. And the second tower, number one, the second tower collapsed. It was the exact same series of detonations, to the T, the exact same series of detonations. And I just stood there, I didn't move. And I got to feel and hear the whole thing. And I can tell you that the air pressure changed. It was like all of a sudden being like in a submarine 300 feet below the surface.
Suddenly I hear. Suddenly I hear.
That only explosives can create this kind of waves. When you hit a solid, the frequency is above 10 Hertz. And here, the frequency which was recorded is under 0.5, 0.6, 0.5 Hertz. And only explosives or earthquakes can create this kind of wave frequencies. Explosions. They record only what I said, subaerial and subterranean explosions. And we can see that the Tower 1 was collapsed by subterranean, an important subterranean explosion, but the Tower 2 and the Tower 7 was collapsed only by explosion at the surface.
Suddenly I hear. Suddenly I hear.
probably the most incredibly poor decision made by the authorities was that the key security guard at Dulles Airport, who was the last man between the airplanes and the hijackers, was never questioned about what he saw on the night of September 10th.
With color photographs of the hijackers, that he was finally able to make a positive ID.
And I said, these two guys, I have seen them. I know these were the two who were there at the airport.
It didn't matter. The FBI was done with Gil.
We don't know if there were accomplices working at Dulles Airport with the hijackers that were never arrested. And this is one of the biggest holes in the 9/11 case.
They knew right away, and there was many of people coming through that checkpoint at the same time.
But Ed, how would they know? The FBI claimed they had no idea who these hijackers were.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it boggles my mind.
What it says to me is if they knew them that morning, they knew who they were the day before, and they should have been able to catch them before they got to the airport.
Orders arrived from...
On the evening of September 10th, 2001, at Dulles International Airport, the rush was over. Argonne security employee Eric Gill had just returned to supervising the West checkpoint. He saw something strange. Gill, a Pakistani man who fled to the U.S. to escape religious persecution, did not want his face shown.
I saw about 5 Middle Eastern people. They were walking through the side door we have at West Checkpoint, which is accessed by only few restricted people. I noticed that 3 of them were wearing a uniform and IDs. 2 other guys who were not wearing a uniform and had no IDs, and they were trying to escort these 2 guys through there. As soon as they walked inside the checkpoint, they just stopped there and started watching around. That made me suspicious.
Gill's suspicions were well placed. The men, dressed in United Airlines ground workers' uniforms, wanted access to a door that led to the concourse and parked planes. The men tried to use one electronic badge to swipe through. Gill stopped them.
They didn't like it, and he abused me, and he said, "F*** off. We are people you don't know. You should be allowed to go through here, but you make your own rules." And he just walked out with it.
Eric Gill and other witnesses took no further action, but the Middle Eastern men were not through. Gill would later identify 2 of the men as the Al-Qaeda hijackers of a plane from Boston, as well as American Airlines Flight 77.
Washington, D.C., the headquarters of the Federal Aviation Administration. They want Anchorage Center to tell the Korean airliner to change its squawk to 7500, the emergency number to be used only in one situation: hijack. This order would make KAL Flight 085 the only airliner in the sky on 9/11, and perhaps ever, to deliberately squawk 7500. For 18 long minutes, Anchorage Center does not act on Washington's order. Phone calls are made to question the order because it is so unusual and because lives are at stake. Exactly who talked to who and what was said is being withheld by authorities. What is unexplained is why the aircraft was ordered to turn on its hijack signal, and which agencies were in the know about that decision.
Yeah, I've never had to issue a hijack squawk to an aircraft. I mean, we can issue an emergency code if we think the aircraft is having an issue, and what they do when they squawk, there's 3 particular codes that they can squawk, and it's basically emergency radio failure hijack. And it actually tags up on other controller scopes, and also scopes down in the lower 48, if like at the command center, anybody, probably the military. I can't really speak to how their equipment works, but it just kind of tags them up a little bit differently. So it's a more pronounced target on the scope. So I've never had to do it before. I never had to do it after that. It was a strange request at the time. I never read it in the books where you had to do that. I've never, you know, we wouldn't necessarily ever issue that code to an aircraft, because the way I look at it, it's not ours to issue, it's the pilot's to issue, because it's a very serious code. So The 7500 squawk was the hijack code. Was actually a supervisor came down and said we need to have the Korean Air squawk 7500, and I said, well, I didn't really think it was the right thing to do, so they actually left and regrouped and talked about it, and I had my opinions of why it wasn't, but then later I was ordered to do it. So.
And what were your thoughts? Why did you not want to do that?
We'd already had some miscommunication with the military that morning. There'd already been some threats to shoot down some aircraft, one that I was particularly working, or probably others that happened to, that if they didn't follow whatever air traffic commands that we issued at the time, that they would be shot down. And I had an aircraft that was just south of Anchorage. On his way in, he was told to land at Anchorage. And at 40 miles south of Anchorage, I was told to turn him or he would be shot down. And
24, Anchorage Center radios Korean Air Flight 085 and delivers this astonishing message.
Korean Air 085 Center.
Yes, Center, Korean Air 085, go ahead.
Korean Air 085, squawk 75.
Confirm squawk 75 with 00.
Korean Air 085, affirmative.
What could possibly explain this strange and monumental instruction? To this day, even the RCMP are as much in the dark as anyone else.
Speaking to the pilot, I mean, he was quite adamant, that he was instructed. I mean, that was his explanation, that he was instructed to. And he thought that was a strange request at the time.
The dangerous order is given to the airliner at about the same time it is directed to fly to Whitehorse. For the next 90 minutes, as it cruises at 37,000 feet over the skies of Alaska and the Yukon, Korean Air 085 emits the ominous hijack signal continuously until it is on the ground in Whitehorse. As Yukon schools evacuate and ring their fire alarm bells, the hostile 747 enters Canadian airspace, along with the cargo flight 281, 2 fighter jets, an AWACS surveillance aircraft, and at least 1 refueling jet for the F-15s. Flight 085 is handed off from Anchorage Center to Edmonton Air Traffic Control, squawking 7500 and running low on fuel because of the extra time and distance it has had to travel. In Whitehorse, RCMP Inspector Grant is sure of one thing: it was not a language problem.
I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are.
saw one of them. His partner said they've got 2 more to give 3 out of the 4 black boxes. And we've also talked to an airline investigative specialist who says never in the annals of history have they ever found where they couldn't at least find the black boxes. You guys, everybody at this site went through that debris with such a fine-tooth comb, they were finding bone fragments the size of nail clippings and DNA matching it. Yet we're told the black boxes, for the first time in history, destroyed, gone, never found them. I'm expected to believe that. You believe that? Then where are they?
I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are.
Even bin Laden's displays of strength for the Western media were faked. The fighters in this video had been hired for the day and told to bring their own weapons. For beyond his own small group, bin Laden had no formal organization, until the Americans invented one for him. In January 2001, a trial began in a Manhattan courtroom of 4 men accused of the embassy bombings in East Africa. But the Americans had also decided to prosecute bin Laden in his absence. But to do this under American law, the prosecutors needed evidence of a criminal organization, because as with the mafia, that would allow them to prosecute the head of the organization, even if he could not be linked directly to the crime. And the evidence for that organization was provided for them by an ex-associate of bin Laden's called Jamal al-Fadl.
During the investigation of the 1998 bombings, there is a walk-in source, Jamal al-Fadl, who's a Sudanese militant who was with bin Laden in the early 90s, who has been passed around a whole series of Middle Eastern secret services, none of whom want much to do with him, who ends up in America and is taken on by the American government effectively as a key prosecution witness, and given a huge amount of American taxpayers' money at the same time. His account is used as raw material to build up a picture of Al-Qaeda. The picture that the FBI want to build up is one that will fit the existing laws that they will have to use to prosecute those responsible for the bombing. Now, those laws were drawn up to counteract organised crime, the mafia, drugs crime, crimes where people being a member of an organisation is extremely important. You have to have an organisation to get a prosecution. And you have al-Fadl and a number of other witnesses, a number of other sources, who are happy to feed into this, who've got material that, looked at in a certain way, can be seen to show this organisation's existence. You put the two together and you get what is the first bin Laden myth, the first Al-Qaeda myth, and because it's one of the first, it's extremely influential.
The picture al-Fadl drew for the Americans of bin Laden was of an all-powerful figure at the head of a large terrorist network that had an organised hierarchy of control. He also said that bin Laden had given this network a name, Al-Qaeda. It was a dramatic and powerful picture of bin Laden, but it bore little relationship to the truth. The reality was that bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri had become the focus of a loose association of disillusioned Islamist militants who were attracted by the new strategy. But there was no organisation. These were militants who mostly planned their own operations and looked to bin Laden for funding and assistance. He was not their commander. There is also no evidence that bin Laden used the term Al-Qaeda to refer to the name of a group until after September the 11th, when he realised that this was the term the Americans had given him.
The Taliban. Are you still of the view that Al-Qaeda is more of a myth than a reality? It's what you said last year. You also said you weren't even sure that they existed. Really?
Exactly, that's my view today as well.
That Al-Qaeda is a myth?
It is for me a myth. I have never had a report from any Afghan source on Al-Qaeda or what they were doing. We don't see them, we cannot visualize them. For us, they don't exist. I've never had a report from our intelligence, I've never had a report from our people, I've never come across them.
Did they exist in September the 11th? On September the 11th, 2001, was Al-Qaeda operating in Afghanistan?
I have come across the Taliban, I've come across other groups, I've come across the people called, calling themselves different names, different outfits of extremists and terrorists. We have reports about them. I don't know if Al-Qaeda existed and I don't know if they exist. For me, it's a myth. I have to feel tangible about it before I can say they are there. Well, reports say they are there, but I have no information.
Your allies in the US government,
se.
your allies in the US government, NATO forces on the ground in Afghanistan all said that they were there fighting Al-Qaeda fighters. When you say it's a myth, you've not seen any evidence, did they call you a conspiracy theorist? Some might say you sound like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, if saying that something does not exist does not mean a conspiracy. It's my judgment, it's my feeling. Maybe they are there, but I have not seen them and I have not had a report about them. Any report that would indicate that Al-Qaeda is operating in Afghanistan. And I've also been in conversation with various American officials. The last one that I had was last year, in which they told me that there are perhaps not even more than 30 to 35 individuals. So if that's the entire strength of an organization, for me, that's a myth.